Sarah Miller still remembered that childhood nightmare with unsettling clarity. Even now, 3 decades later, the details remained sharp, etched into her memory like the grotesque drawings she'd filled her sketchbooks with as a child. Back then, her family lived in a modest 2-bedroom ranch house on the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio. It was a quiet suburb, the kind where kids played outside until dusk and neighbors knew each other's names. Sarah, just 7 years old, had been sprawled on the worn living room rug one evening, engrossed in her toy dinosaurs. The room was dimly lit by a single floor lamp, casting long shadows across the shag carpet. Outside, the Ohio twilight deepened, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. She remembered looking up, her gaze drifting towards the large picture window that looked out onto the small, fenced backyard. The curtains weren't fully drawn, and she saw it. The sheer size was the first shock. It stood at least 5 feet tall, maybe more, its hulking form partially obscured by the window frame. Its torso was enormous, grotesquely bloated like a distended tick, covered in filthy, matted feathers that seemed a sickening blend of grimy gray and muddy brown. Enormous, ragged wings, reminiscent of a vulture's but impossibly large, were partially folded against its sides. But it was the face, if it could be called that froze the blood in her veins. A huge, unnaturally round head, dominated by enormous, lidless eyes that bulged like glass marbles, reflecting the faint light from the living room lamp. Below them, a twisted, beak-like nose hooked downwards, framing a horrifying, impossibly wide grin that stretched ear to ear, revealing rows of small, needle-sharp teeth. As it shifted slightly, trying to peer deeper into the room, Sarah caught a glimpse of its legs. They were horrifically jointed, bent backwards at the knees like some monstrous bird of prey, ending in clawed feet. Each foot had long, taloned toes. She couldn't count them accurately then, but her childish impression was of far more than 5, perhaps 7 or 8, each tipped with a wickedly curved black claw that scraped faintly against the concrete patio below the window. A strangled gasp escaped her. Terror, pure and primal, seized her. She scrambled backwards, abandoning her toys, and bolted down the short hallway to her small bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Her mother was in the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans audible. But Sarah didn't run to her. Why? Shame? Fear of being called a liar? She huddled on her bed beneath the soft glow of her strawberry shortcake nightlight. The room felt too small, the shadows too deep. Gathering her courage, she crept back to the doorway, peering down the hall towards the living room window. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She hoped, prayed, it had been a trick of the fading light. It wasn't. The monstrous head appeared first, craning sideways to peer into the room. Then, with a rustle of heavy feathers and a scraping sound, the creature hoisted its immense bulk onto the narrow window ledge. Sarah couldn't comprehend how it balanced, how the ledge didn't buckle. It simply perched there, those enormous, unblinking eyes fixed directly on her hiding spot in the hallway gloom. Paralyzed, she watched it. Then it made a sound, a wet, guttural clicking deep in its throat. Ack-lock, followed by a rapid, jarring clack, clack, clack of its teeth. It sounded unnervingly like a large, excited dog snapping at a treat, but louder, sharper, echoing even through the closed window. When it raised one clawed foot and deliberately scraped the talons down the glass pane, producing a high-pitched screech, Sarah's nerve broke. She screamed and fled to the kitchen. 3 nights of uneasy silence followed. The creature hadn't returned to her window since the bars were installed. Sarah began, tentatively, to hope. Maybe the bars deterred it. Maybe it had moved on. Exhausted from nights spent on the hallway floor, she decided to risk sleeping in her own bed. She checked the bars, solid, immovable. She drew the heavy blackout curtains over the new window. She left the small nightlight on. Sleep came fitfully. Just after midnight, the sound jolted her awake. Tap, tap, tap. Scrape. It was coming from her bedroom window, directly from the barred window. The sound grew louder, more insistent, a rhythmic scraping, like claws testing the metal. It's back, it's trying the bars. Heart pounding, she lay frozen for a moment. Then, against her better judgment, driven by a terrible need to see, she slowly reached out and pulled back the edge of the curtain just an inch, peering through the gap between the fabric and the wall. Outside, pressed against the bars, was the nightmare. The huge, unblinking eye filled her view, reflecting the dim glow of her nightlight. Below it, that impossibly wide, grinning maw seemed to leer directly at her. It knew she was there. Sarah screamed, scrambling out of bed and bolting for the door. She yanked it open, fled into the hallway, and slammed it shut, locking it just as a massive thud shook the wall. The creature had thrown itself against the window, hard. Then came the sound she dreaded, the sharp, metallic clang of claws scraping frantically, furiously against the iron bars. A frustrated, guttural snarl vibrated through the door, followed by the rapid, angry clack, clack, clack of its teeth snapping at the metal. It beat its wings against the bars, a heavy, jarring whump, whump, shaking the entire wall, but the bars held. The reinforced glass behind them held. Sarah slid down the hallway wall, pulling her knees to her chest, listening to the enraged creature vent its fury on the barrier keeping it out. The sounds were terrifying. The metallic screeches, the thudding impacts, the guttural growls, the relentless clicking. But they remained outside. After what felt like an eternity, the assault lessened. The scraping became sporadic. The thuds ceased. Finally, there was only the sound of heavy wings beating the air, fading as the creature retreated into the night. Sunrise found Sarah still sitting in the hallway, utterly drained but alive. The creature was real. It was vicious. It was hunting, growing bolder. It knew where she lived. But for now, the iron bars stood between her and its hunger. She rarely ventured out after dark. The flyers on the community board continued to appear, a grim tally of the neighborhood's missing pets. Occasionally, walking past her windows during the day, she'd spot a single, stiff, dirty, gray-brown feather caught on the cold iron of the bars outside. A reminder, a promise. It hadn't forgotten her. It would be back. Her home was no longer a sanctuary, but a fortress under siege, the silence outside her barred windows heavy with the memory of claws on metal and the echo of hungry teeth clicking in the dark. Her mother, wiping her hands on a dish towel, looked exasperated. "Sarah Miller, what on earth now? I'm trying to get dinner ready, honey. More monsters under the bed?" Her tone was dismissive, tinged with the weary patience reserved for an imaginative child prone to tall tales. Sarah tried to stammer out what she'd seen. The huge bird thing, the teeth, the claws on the window. But her mother just sighed. "Sweetie, it was probably just an owl, a big one. Or maybe Mrs. Henderson's cat jumping on the bins again. Go wash up for dinner." The dismissal was absolute. The creature became Sarah's secret terror, relegated to the realm of bad dreams. Yet, it haunted her. For years afterwards, her drawings were filled with bulbous bodies on backwards bent legs, dominated by huge, staring eyes and wide, toothy grins. She'd always assumed it was just a particularly vivid nightmare, a manifestation of childhood fears. until 15 years later. Sarah, now 22 and living in a cramped fifth-floor apartment in a slightly run-down complex in Akron, was returning home late one Friday night after studying with her friend Chloe. The walk from the bus stop was short but poorly lit, the sodium vapor streetlights casting long, distorted shadows. As she approached her building, a movement in the large oak tree near the entrance snagged her attention. She glanced up, more out of habit than curiosity. Her blood turned to ice, perched heavily on a thick branch, partially obscured by leaves but horrifyingly visible in the sickly yellow glow, was Etienne. The same grotesquely bloated torso, the same ragged, grimy feathers, the same huge, round head swiveling slowly, and those eyes. Those enormous, lidless, glassy eyes seemed to glow faintly in the gloom. They weren't looking at her yet. The creature seemed preoccupied, scanning the empty courtyard below. 15 years vanished in an instant. The terror was identical, raw and choking. It can't be. It was a dream, a childhood nightmare. This isn't Dayton. This is Akron. Logic screamed impossibility, but the primal part of her brain recognized the silhouette, the posture, the sheer wrongness of it. Fear of being seen galvanized her. Heart pounding like a war drum, she fumbled with her keys, shoved the heavy main door open, and practically fell into the relative safety of the dimly lit lobby. She took the stairs 2 at a time, gasping, not stopping until she slammed and bolted her own apartment door behind her. Leaning against the door, trembling, she tried to rationalize. Stress, exhaustion, a trick of the light. But the image was burned onto her retinas. Cautiously, heart still racing, she crept to the living room window overlooking the courtyard. She peered out, scanning the oak tree. Nothing. The courtyard was empty except for a stray tabby cat darting between the benches. Relief, thin and shaky, began to seep in. See? Just your imagination running wild. Too much caffeine, not enough sleep. She was about to turn away, to try and laugh at her own foolishness when she heard it. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was unmistakable. That rapid, chilling snap of teeth. Her head whipped towards the sound. The creature was now perched on a smaller maple tree closer to the building. Its head swiveled with unnerving speed, those huge eyes fixing on the tabby cat sniffing near the base of the oak. With a heavy, leathery whoosh of its enormous wings, the creature dropped from the branch. It landed with a soft thud, pinning the unsuspecting cat instantly beneath one massive taloned foot. The cat yowled in terror, a sound cut brutally short as the creature bent its head. There was another wet ack-lock, a sickening crunch, and the cat's head vanished into that wide, grinning maw. Sarah watched, frozen in horror, as the creature tilted its head back and swallowed, its throat working visibly beneath the feathers. It then began tearing methodically at the remaining carcass with its beak and claws. Sarah stumbled back from the window, bile rising in her throat. Her legs gave way, and she sank to the floor, trembling violently. It's real. It's carnivorous. It killed that cat. It's here. Questions tumbled through her mind, chaotic and terrifying. Was it following her? Had it somehow tracked her from Dayton? Or was this just a terrible coincidence? Why Akron? Why now? The rational part of her mind fractured under the weight of the impossible made horrifyingly tangible. She scrambled up, rushing to every window in the small apartment, living room, bedroom, even the tiny bathroom, yanking the blinds shut and drawing the curtains tight. She retreated to her bed, pulling the comforter over her head. But the images, the crunch, the swallowing, those cold, alien eyes, played on a loop behind her eyelids. Exhaustion eventually claimed her, a fitful sleep haunted by feathers and teeth. Morning brought a fragile sense of normalcy. Sunlight streamed around the edges of the curtains. It was Sunday. Gathering her courage, Sarah peeked out the living room window. In the spot beneath the maple tree, a dark, ominous stain marred the concrete. Blood. People moved about the courtyard below, walking dogs, heading out for coffee, utterly oblivious. The creature was gone. The mundane reality of the morning felt surreal, jarring against the horror of the night before. She needed groceries. Steeling herself, she left the apartment, locking the door firmly behind her. In the lobby, the community bulletin board caught her eye. Amongst the ads for lost keys and yoga classes were several fresh flyers. Missing: Ronald, golden retriever, friendly, last seen near Maple Saint. Lost: tabby cat, gray and white, answers to mittens. Have you seen my kitten? Black, white paws. A cold dread settled in Sarah's stomach. It wasn't just the stray last night. As she pushed open the main door to leave, a young mother with a boy of about 5 came out behind her. The boy was chattering excitedly. And it was huge, Mom. Bigger than the biggest owl. It had giant eyes like marbles, and its legs were all bendy backwards. It looked right at me from the tree near Mrs. Gable's balcony. The mother sighed, scrolling through her phone. Billy, honey, you have such an imagination. Probably just a big crow or a raccoon. Sarah froze, then hurried on, the boy's words echoing in her ears. He saw it too. It wasn't her imagination. It wasn't a dream. The creature was real, and it was hunting in her neighborhood. The trip to the grocery store was a blur of heightened senses, jumping at shadows, scanning the sky. She rushed back, groceries forgotten the moment her apartment door was locked again. She spent the day trying to focus on a college report due Monday, but the words swam on the screen. As dusk fell, a deep, familiar dread settled over her like a shroud. She kept all the lights on, drawing the curtains even tighter. Midnight approached. She was finally preparing for bed, exhaustion warring with fear, when she entered her bedroom. Without thinking, her gaze flickered towards the unshaded window. Outside, the branches of the oak tree swayed violently. Then she realized it wasn't the wind. Something large and dark was thrashing amidst the branches, trying to gain purchase on a limb thick enough to hold its weight. Wings beat heavily against the leaves. It's trying to land. Panic surged, cold and sharp. Acting on pure adrenaline, she grabbed the digital camera she used for her art classes from her desk. Heart hammering, she crept closer to the window, her finger poised over the shutter button. The thrashing stopped. The branches stilled. Did it leave? She leaned forward slightly, peering into the darkness. Suddenly, the monstrous head snapped into view from the right side of the window frame, those enormous eyes glaring directly at her, mere inches from the glass. The wide, toothy grin seemed to stretch wider. Sarah screamed, staggering backwards and falling hard onto her bedroom floor. Outside, the creature slammed its wings against the glass. Whump! Whump! Shaking the entire pane, it scrabbled frantically at the ledge with its backwards bent legs, talons screeching on the metal. The horrible clicking sounds intensified. Ack-lock! Clack, clack, clack! Mixed with guttural, croaking rasps. It threw its body against the window, a terrifying thud of solid weight impacting the glass. Crack! A spiderweb of fractures bloomed across the pane where its beak struck. It wanted in. It wanted her. Sarah's legs felt like water, but the sight of the cracking glass injected a desperate burst of energy. She scrambled to her feet and bolted from the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her and turning the lock. Immediately, the assault on the window intensified. She heard the sickening crunch of breaking glass, the splintering of wood, the furious beating of wings now inside her bedroom. It was in. The creature was inside her apartment. It had broken through. A guttural, hungry, snarling sound came from the other side of the bedroom door, followed by the terrifying scrape of claws on wood. Thud! The door shuddered in its frame as something massive slammed against it. Scratch, scratch, scrape. It was trying to claw its way through. Sarah backed down the narrow hallway towards the only windowless room, the bathroom. The phrase, "My home is my castle," flashed absurdly through her mind. Not anymore. The castle was breached, and the monster within wanted to devour her. She imagined those talons ripping through the door, those backwards legs carrying it towards her, that wide mouth snapping shut on her limbs, the needle teeth shredding flesh, the clack, clack, clack as it crunched bone. The sheer animal terror was paralyzing. She locked herself in the bathroom, sinking to the cold tile floor, pressing her back against the door. She listened, every nerve screaming. She heard it moving in her bedroom, the heavy tread, the rustle of feathers, the low, continuous growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Then, silence. Had it gone back out the window? She didn't dare believe it. She didn't dare move. She huddled there, trembling, listening for any sound, any scrape, any click. She stayed like that, rigid with fear, until the first gray streaks of dawn light seeped under the bathroom door. Only then, muscles screaming from tension and cold, did she cautiously, slowly, turn the lock and push the door open a crack. The hallway was empty. The bedroom door was intact, but scarred with deep, parallel gouges where claws had raked the wood. Taking a shuddering breath, she pushed the bedroom door open. The sight made her gasp. Shards of glass littered the carpet like lethal confetti. The window frame was splintered, jagged pieces of wood protruding. The curtains hung askew, torn in places. Deep scratches marred the wooden floor near the window, and caught on a jagged splinter of the window frame were several stiff, dirty feathers, long and coarse, the same grimy gray-brown she remembered from childhood. It hadn't been a dream. It had been here. It had tried to get her. The rest of Sunday passed in a haze of numb shock and frantic activity. She swept up the glass, patched the window temporarily with cardboard and duct tape, and called a 24-hour handyman service. When the two repairmen arrived, whistling at the damage, they were baffled. "5th floor, huh? Must have been one hell of a storm last night we missed," one remarked, eyeing the claw marks on the floor and the feathers Sarah hadn't managed to clean up yet. "You sure you don't want to just board it up proper? Replacing this whole unit ain't cheap." When Sarah insisted, her voice tight and her hands trembling visibly, on not just a new window but heavy-duty security bars installed on the outside, they exchanged puzzled glances. "Bars? Up here? Lady, squirrels ain't that ambitious." But her palpable fear and willingness to pay cash convinced them. They installed the bars, thick wrought iron grids bolted securely into the brickwork. Sarah watched them work, jumping at every unexpected sound, scanning the sky constantly. She offered no explanation, knowing how insane the truth sounded. Who would believe a giant, carnivorous nightmare bird was stalking her? The flyers on the community board kept appearing. Missing cats, missing small dogs. Then, a week after the attack on her window, the horror escalated. It was early evening. Sarah, forcing herself into a semblance of routine, needed to hang laundry. Her small balcony, accessed through the living room sliding door, was cramped and only partially glassed in, offering little sense of security. The courtyard below seemed quiet. Taking a deep breath, basket in hand, she slid the door open and stepped out. The air was cool. She began mechanically pinning shirts to the line, her eyes darting nervously towards the trees. She was almost finished when a blood-curdling scream ripped through the twilight. It came from the small playground area beside her building. Sarah dropped a clothespin, her blood running cold. Peering cautiously over the balcony railing, she saw a scene of pure terror. A young man, maybe in his 20s, was pinned to the ground near the swings. Standing over him, massive wings partially spread, was the creature. One terrible taloned foot was clamped down on the man's arm. Even from 5 stories up, Sarah heard the sickening crunch of bone. The man screamed again, a raw sound of agony and terror. The creature's head dipped, that wide maw opening. Acklock! Clack, clack, clack! It wasn't just clicking now. It was making a horrible, wet, tearing sound. Sarah fumbled for her phone inside the apartment, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. There's a thing in the playground. It's attacking a man. It's huge, like a giant bird. It's eating him. Sarah's voice was high-pitched, frantic. Ma'am, please calm down. Can you describe the attacker? Is it a person? An animal? It's a monster, bigger than a person. Feathers, claws, it's got wings. Please, hurry, he's screaming. Ma'am, dispatching units now, but I need you to remain calm. Are you safe? Are you witnessing this directly? Yes, from my balcony, 5th floor. Please hurry, it's biting him. Sarah watched in helpless horror as the creature tore a chunk from the man's shoulder. The screaming intensified, then abruptly stopped. The creature lifted its head, something red and glistening hanging from its beak. Oh God! It killed him! It killed him! Sarah sobbed into the phone. Units are en route, ma'am. Stay on the line. Stay inside and lock your doors. Do not approach. But Sarah had already hung up, slamming the sliding door shut and locking it, sinking to the floor inside, trembling uncontrollably. She hadn't helped. She couldn't help. The police found something later. Reports were vague. An animal attack, possibly a large stray dog pack, though no dogs were found. The victim was identified as a local college student. The news mentioned severe trauma and ongoing investigation. Sarah spent that night and the next 2 huddled in the hallway, clutching a pillow and blanket, jumping at every creak in the old building.